Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of The Shrimp Tank. We come to you virtually from Seattle, the entire Pacific Northwest. And today, as we often do, we head down I-5 into the Bay Area. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, boy, you are in the right place. This is where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, everyone. I'm Dan Whedon, and I'm joined by my co-host down in the Bay Area, Linda Popke. Our guest today is Hugh Blane. Hugh is the president of Claris Consulting. He is a strategic advisor and peak performance coach who helps executives, entrepreneurs, and investors accelerate business value by transforming human potential into inspired performance. Hugh is the author of Seven Principles of Transformational Leadership, Create a Mindset of Passion, Innovation, and Growth. And we're going to talk about this, the soon-to-be released second book, Lead Boldly, How to Coach Others to Greatness. That's going to be released in June of 2024. Can't wait to see that. Hugh's clients include Microsoft, Sony Pictures, Starbucks, Nordstrom, KPMG, Costco, whole bunch of companies that you would know the names of. Hugh has published over 475 articles and videos on leadership and mindset and is an in-demand speaker. He's an in-demand podcast guest too. Hugh, we're glad you're on the Shrimp Tank again. We'll talk a little more about that. We'll be with you in a moment. Listen, everyone, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Overcast for my friend Craig Swanson, and YouTube. You can say we are what, Linda?
We are ubiquitous.
Of course, we're ubiquitous. Now, before we bring on Hugh, I do want to bring on, and sadly, I'm a little sad, Linda Popke as co-host for the final time. Linda is leaving us. She's had, I think, about a 2-year run. And I can't tell you, Linda, how much I've enjoyed you being a co-host on the show. So I'm going to throw right off the bat, I'm going to do a little plead the fifth with you. Plead the fifth, Linda. What are some of the great memories that you're going to take away? I'm hoping they're great. I hope they're great. What are some of the memories, I should say that you're going to take away from being the co-host on the show?
Well, Dan, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity because it's been a fun couple of years and I've enjoyed doing this. I have met some of the most interesting people, mainly in the Pacific Northwest, but a couple of other places as well. And we've talked about all kinds of things, whether it was about fitness or coffee or, all kinds of things that I can't even, name all of them. But what was interesting to me is how many different people are doing such really fascinating things and that we're able to get their stories out and have them talk a little bit about what's important to them, what's important to entrepreneurs, the lessons that they can give to entrepreneurs. So I've really enjoyed being here and I'll miss you guys.
Well, we'll miss you too. Maybe we'll have you back to talk about some of the great things that you are doing. So thank you. Now, listen, Linda, we've got a slam bam. Is that right? Slam bam guest today. I think it's something like that. I was trying to be witty, but I don't know. We've got a fun guy. Hugh Blane is a colleague and friend of both of ours. We both came out of the same consulting community with Alan Weiss. I've known Hugh for, boy, I'm going to say, gosh, at least 10 years. I think you probably the same. And for our listeners going way back pre-COVID, Hugh was a guest before when we were in studio. So Hugh is returning. He's doing the virtual thing. Hugh, welcome back. What have you been doing for like the last 5 years? Or at least, what are you doing now? Tell everybody about the great work you do.
So first of all, did you just call me a mushroom, a fungi? I'm just checking out, listen, what do mushrooms do? I've been sitting underneath a rock. It's a blast to be back because we had so much fun when we did the first session on Shrimp Camp. So what have I been doing in the last 5 years? So number one, we were promoting the book, 7 Principles of Transformational Leadership. Yep. That came out right at the time I think we did the first podcast. Yes. So we were really kind of getting that up and running and really talking about the 7 principles and how that led to transformation inside organizations. And then within the last 18 months, I've been writing Lead Boldly, because it was kind of like the extension from transformational leadership. I wanted to call the book Transformational Coaching. But for those of you who know, commercial publishers ultimately get to decide what they're going to call the book. And so that's what I've been doing and having a blast.
How cool. How cool. So you've got a lot of insights in the book, and Dan, just so you know, I've helped Hugh with his book, just
You
like I
did.
helped him with
Ah.
helped you with yours. So I've got some familiarity with it. But talk a little bit, Hugh, you talk about 3 different main areas. You need to love deeply, you need to learn daily, and then as a result of that, you can live boldly. So talk about
Right.
why it's important to start with learning and loving, and what you mean by loving, because that's a word that people
Yeah.
are a little bit off on.
Well, let me, if I may, Linda and Dan, let me pull back just a little bit and let me give people some context. In the world of work, after a worldwide pandemic, there are certain data points that people will probably hear and they'll go, that makes complete sense. Here's what we know, and I'm going to quote some numbers from Deloitte, Microsoft, Gallup, Harvard Business Review, the Flow Research Collective. Here's what we know in the world of work: 84% of employees today feel stressed out at work. 84%. And that 70% of them are constantly distracted. 67% right now are burned out. 67% are disengaged. And here's this really strange one: 58% of employees trust strangers more than they do their boss. Right? We're constantly distracted. We get 36 email interruptions, per hour. We get disrupted 56 times per day. All of those things lead to a level of just underperformance. And the question that I am asked over and over again: how do we recruit talent that's not just mercenary, how do I benefit from this job financially, but how do I get employees who are truly missional? So there's a world of difference between a mercenary and a missional. So the missional employee is someone who really loves the work, and I will dare say that they actually love the customer. So in my first book, I talked about the flourishing business model. You want to have a flourishing business? Great. Have a flourishing customer experience. That means that the employees need to be flourishing so that they can create that experience. And that means that a leader's job is to be flourishing so that their employees can flourish. Well, I wanted to build on that. And I'm going to say that we don't use the word love in the world of work nearly enough. And that when you really love something, and I mean the customer, the work that you're doing, then that means that you're continually trying to learn more about what it is that really delights the customer and create systems and processes and services and products that delight the customer so that the business can flourish. But we're in a very competitive marketplace. So you have to do differentiated work. And that means you have to experiment and you have to take risks, which requires a level of boldness and courage and willingness to move outside of the safe confines of what is known, what is safe, and what is predictable. So if I were to say something to your audience, I'd say leading boldly is what's required these days to not just do pedestrian work. So you have to move outside of the safe and comfortable, which means that the first 2, finding your passion and the thing that you love the most and just choosing to master it and learn about it every single day, those 2 things precede the boldness. So that's the context. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Hugh, I think it's fascinating. As you know, I work with a lot of small and medium-sized business owners.
Yeah.
You work with larger corporations.
Right.
I'm going to guess that those numbers the statistics that you gave might be as accurate or maybe even worse for the small business owner who is, everyone I talk to has staffing issues, right? Everybody's got staffing issues. And I
Right.
wonder what the takeaway of what you just said translates to the small business owner. So let me ask you this way. Let me ask this way. The small business owner often loves what they've created. They were very good at what they did. Doesn't matter what they are, whether they're a contractor or whatever. They love what they do. I think they believe that others should love what they do, but sometimes there's a gap in there. Can you speak to that?
Totally. I love that question, Dan, because the root of it is that when you look at most small business owners, they decided that they didn't either want to be told what to do, so they kind of went out on their own so that they could do their own thing. And when you build something, you look at it and say, look at this gorgeous baby that I've created. And they just think that this is the best thing that's ever happened. When you want to start scaling a business and when you want to then employ other employees, the question, as I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday, he said, how do I attract the kind of employees that are going to feel as passionate about this business as I do? And I said, well, let me ask you, do you really love your work and your customer? Or dare I say, do you just love the independence of running your own business? Those are two very different things. Because here's the thing I'm going to suggest. There's three kinds of love, right? There is the eros, philia, and there's agape. And that the eros is that when I first met my wife, I went, holy smokes, there's a woman who's 5'10", she's Greek, she's got these amazing cheekbones, she's gorgeous. I wonder if she'd go out with me. So there was this part of me that there was the romantic affection and attraction to Allison. Then there's the philia, which is like the Philadelphia. It's the city of brotherly love. So it's kind of like the love that we have for family and whatnot. And then there's agape, and that's typically used in spiritual contexts or from faith traditions. That agape is the type of love that is sacrificial and it's self-directed towards others. Most people love what they do more than the impact that their customer had, most than their customer impact. So when you are like passionately in love with the customer and you're going to do everything you possibly can to make their life better, I think that becomes contagious. And people want to be around you. And that's not what most people are in love with. They are in love with what works best for them as opposed to their customer. And so therefore, you don't have people who are equally as passionate about it. So Dan, let me stop and say, am I answering your question or is that too theoretical?
Nope. I think you answered it perfectly. And I think what we'll get into, I know Linda has a question, but I think what we get into is how does that get fixed? How does a leader get that fixed? And I don't want to jump into to Linda's question, but I think that that's somebody, if I was a business owner that had 25 employees, I might want to know that. We can talk about that. Linda, I don't know. Do you want me to?
Yeah, you go ahead. Why don't you go ahead? Because while we're on
let's answer. Let's just answer that. I have 15 employees. I got 20 employees. I'm a small business. I'm the founder. I love what I do. I love what I'm created, product, service, whatever. How do I create that same type of love? Let's just start with the employees. How do we create that type of love with the employees?
Here's what I would do. I would go to all of the employees and I would do something first. I would just say, I want to do a gut check because listen, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. Let's say the employees do feel the same way. I don't know. So if we don't know, then we go and ask them. So here's what I would do. I would go to every employee, if you've only got 15, and say, do me a favor. Tell me, what is it that we do around here that really makes our customers' lives better? How are we differentiating what we're doing? Tell me, what is the mission and the purpose of this business? And then notice this. Can they answer it with pristine clarity? And can they do it in 30 seconds or less? If they can't answer that, then what the leader has to do is they've got to tune the station into what's in it for them. So they've got to ask the question, what would, if they don't understand it, I've got to clarify that. So they've got to do two things. Here's what we're going to create for our customer that is so distinctive that it creates so much value that they're going to want to come here because there's nobody else they would rather work with. For me and us to do that, I've got to do the exact same thing for you. So tell me this, what is it about this job that fires you up? What part of it do you love? What part of it drives you crazy? Because my job is to create the environment where you can do your best work and do it in such a way that when you go home, you're energized from the day, not drained from the day. So the business has to attract those kind of people. And that is the work of creating a mission and a purpose for the business that not only delights the customer, but that the employees get fired up about.
Man,
It's
I
gotta
love that.
make their
I'm
money
fired
jump.
up. You got me fired up, Hugh. Hey, listen, as you know, we got to pay the bills. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor. When we come back with our guest, Hugh Blane, I've kind of got a surprise for him in our Hot or Not section of the show. I'm going to have a little fun with my good friend, Hugh. He's going to find out when you find out. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. Normally, Linda, I would do an ad read for you, but I want you to have a chance to toot your own horn a little bit. You do great work. You've done work for me. You're doing work for Hugh. Tell everybody out there what you do at Leverage to Market.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan. So I do a lot of things, including strategic marketing, but what I do that's probably most relevant to the people that that you're working with is I help people get their story out of their head into a written, published format. And that can range from everything from someone comes with a completed manuscript like each of you did, and I help you get it edited and ready. You may have publishers like you did. You may need to get it published. It might be an ebook and a printed book, an audio book. Sometimes people have an idea in their head and they say, I can't, I won't, I'm not able to actually write it. So we sit down like this in front of a Zoom and we get the thoughts out, we organize it, and either you write it or I write it. So too many people say they want to write a book and they don't have the time and they don't know where to start. But I can help you get through that. So if you're not a good enough writer, if it sounds too overwhelming, we can help you through that. And the idea is to get that book that might be stuck into an attractive published work. I can ghostwrite it for you if you need me to. So if you have something in your head that you think needs to be published and you'd like to get the world to tell about it, nonfiction, I don't work in fiction, only nonfiction, contact me for a complimentary evaluation of your concept, and I'd love to chat with you.
And I know I can speak, I think, for Hugh. You do great work. And thank you for that. And everybody has a story. That's my belief. Everybody has a story. So Hugh, I know Hugh is a book writer, a publisher. You know what we do with Hot or Not. We were going to ask you questions on business, on life, on a whole bunch of different things. You're going to tell us whether it's hot or not. So here's what I'd like you to do. Little birdie told me that you do a tremendous Scottish brogue, that you can speak.
Oh, Hugh grew up in Scotland. He was born in Scotland.
Right. You know, and I forgot, but you have a Scottish brogue. So here's what I want you to do, Hugh. Humor me, humor us. Hot or Not, book publishing. And if so, tell us about your new book, but you got to do it in Scottish.
So I don't really know why you're having me do this, because if you just want me to be a seal bouncing a ball on my nose to entertain you, I don't think that's really bringing out the very best of me. Do you?
You know what? That was all I needed. That was perfect. Thank you very much. So on a serious note, tell us, Hot or Not, book publishing. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing, and maybe it's not for everybody. Hot or not?
It is absolutely not hot. Now, let me be clear. So my second book is being commercially published, was my first one. And as Linda can attest, you do this because of the credibility. You don't do it because of the literary flexibility with which, you get. When my publisher said, well, we don't think that loving deeply should come first, We want you to put learn daily first. I went, you have got to be kidding me. Wait a minute, let me give you some statistics about why love comes first. And they were leaning into it. And I finally said, listen, I'm not doing the book if you try to change this. I'm the expert here. So it is publishing. Man, it's almost like the mattress industry. It's crazy. It's not something.
But if you were to self-publish, to give Linda a little love, if you were to self-publish and you didn't want to commercially publish, how about getting a book out there about what you do and how to help others?
Well, so I think that self-publishing is great in many regards. If you've got the brand, if you've got a particular industry, then you can go and you can do the self-publishing, or you can do it through an association that's not going to be commercially published. And that is absolutely advantageous. Nothing wrong with that. I think for first time, my first book sold about 8,500, 8,750 copies, which was really good for a first book. First books typically, books sell on average about 250 to 500 copies, right? So I think that it builds your brand and your repute, and that's really important. And so that's the reason why I'm doing it. I may do a third book that would be for a particular audience. I'm not sure yet. I'm actually thinking about that and doing some research now on that.
Okay. All right. So, and just to let people know, if you can get a commercial publisher and someone you feel comfortable with, go with it. If you can't, don't feel like everything is gone. There are options, and there are ways for you to get your book out the door and to get people to hear about it. So tell me a little bit about Hot or Not, an accidental versus a purposeful life. And what I mean by that is, did you start from square one and have this linear route as to where you were going to go, or did things happen kind of differently than you perhaps had planned earlier in your career?
That's a really good question. I think that for the longest period of time, I was living somewhat of an accidental life. I was somewhat itinerant in the respect that I'm a native-born Scotsman that then moved to Canada, that then moved to Birmingham, Alabama, that then recruited out to Washington State. So I've had a lot of different experiences, but they weren't really focused or directional. When I sold my last company back in 2009, as some of you, I think maybe Dan, we talked about this. When I sold that company, I walked away with thinking that I was going to, at 50 years old, walk away with enough retirement income. That was not the case. I walked away with $7,500, and that was the maximum amount that I had at the time. I want you to just put this into context. I'm 49 years of age, and I've got $7,500 in my investment pool. Yes, we had a house, and yes, my wife had a small 401k. I had to get really serious. And so I became very, very targeted and very laser focused on the purpose. My purpose was to convert human potential into accelerated, inspired performance. And everything I did was around that. It is by a lot, we've been blessed immensely that we have recovered financially in 12 years. What most people do in 35 years, we've done it in 12 years. Now, I don't recommend to anyone to do it on the 12-year plan because it's really, really hard, but we were able to do that. So now what I have found is, if you are not crystal clear about the type of life that you want to live, then you meander. So there's a lot of research coming out now about the term your future self, that if you can actually design, you can actually see yourself 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years in the future, you can reverse engineer it. And so that then means that you're on purpose, and you reverse engineer it. And then you say, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to put these actions in place. That then becomes purposeful. And that's a life that brings you to life, full of love, full of learning, and it's about living boldly.
So I want to add on to that, Hugh, because you brought up something that you and I have talked about, which is having people envision what they might look like in 5 or 10 years.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about some of your thoughts about how you can bring that to life for people so they really understand that.
So one of the greatest ways to do that is to write your own eulogy. And this is an idea that's been around for a long period of time. But if you were to say, what is it that I want people to say about me when I'm 95 years of age, they're sitting around my funeral, there's 100 people there, whatever. What do I want people to say about me? So for me, one of the things that I said, I want people to say that he was extravagantly generous. And I think that the old admonition that says, to those who much has been given, much is expected, I want to make sure that I actually live that out. So you can then say, this is what I want people to say. How would I then start creating that? So, and here's what the research tells us. If you cannot see yourself 20 years in the future, then you will treat that future self like a stranger. And how do we treat strangers? We somewhat dismiss them. And if we're dismissing that future self, then what we're doing is we're acting on what works today, not on what works in the future. So the reality is we have to be able to see that person. And literally what you can do is take your picture today, for those of you brave souls, and have it age advanced by 10 years. And look at it. And the moment you do that, you say, time is not standing still. I am getting older every day. And if this is me in 10 years, what do I want my life to be like? That then means that we can reverse engineering and we can start pulling, we can create a to-do list of things to do, but then we can create a to-be list. Here's who I want to be in 10 years. Did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
So I did that. I think I went 20 years. I did that facial thing, and I looked eerily like my dad. It was a little bit creepy to me, but with a beard. He didn't have a beard, so I looked like my dad with a beard. Now, Hugh, I'm an avid golfer, and the book I wrote, the most recent, uses golf at times as a metaphor. Golf is a game of failure, right?
Yeah.
And I believe life is a game of failure. But the best golfers in the world use those failures as lessons. I think it's hard for us humans to do the same thing. And I think this time of year, it's December, people are doing reflecting on the past year, maybe the past couple of years. They're looking into the future. And sometimes they do it with dread. And I believe it's because of failure. So when you're talking about look into the future, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, how would you what would you say to somebody who says, I'm looking in the future, I can't change it. I fail. And I think that is even business owners who do that. I think that we're all human. Talk a little bit about how you have the discipline to say, no, that I'm going to change it. I'm going to learn from everything.
So there's a really interesting thing about what you're referring to, Dan, is that if you're talking to somebody and they say, wait a minute, hold on a second, hold on. I cannot change what's going to happen over 10 years. I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit and say, hold on a second. Let's just say, did you have any control whatsoever about what you have created over the last 10 years? And if you're telling me that the current life that you're living is completely accidental, that you had no control over it, that you didn't make any decisions, then okay, then the reality is you could say in 10 years, it's going to be the same thing. So I'm a leaf floating in a river, just going downhill, and it's just going, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Most people would then say, well, I didn't mean to say that. I said, okay, what if you did have some control, not massive control, right? What are some of the things that you would like to make sure that are in play that you want to create? So let's just do some experimentation here. And I think that someone who would say, I have no control, let me be bold here. One is they could have had a life that has they've been beaten up and life has just been really, really hard. So at that particular point, you've got a particular mindset that needs to be changed. So I would probably pull back from the exercise and say, before we do anything, we've got to cultivate that you have a choice and that you made decisions over the last 10 years. and there are consequences for those decisions. Let's look at all the decisions you made over the last 10 years, which ones were successful, which ones were not. And I think that when we do that exercise, that mental jujitsu, that people would then say, wait a minute, I do have more control than what I thought. So that's where I would go with somebody.
Interesting. Before we go to the break, I just want you to talk a little bit, Hugh, because the whole idea about living boldly. I would love to have your definition of boldly, because I think what some of us consider to be bold is not big and bold enough. So how do you know when you're thinking boldly enough?
How do you know when you're thinking boldly? When your sphincter muscle goes and you go, wait a minute. And I think it's bold. So there's a thing called a misagi, which is MISOGI, which is a Japanese term that says, and some of your audience knows this. What it says is, over the next 12 months, I'm going to do something that's transformational that I've never done before. And a misogi is something that you look at and say, I got a 50-50 chance of doing this. There's 50-50 chance of being successful. And there's certain new habits that I'm going to have to do. But this is a transformational process that's going to transform my thinking, my body, my mind, my spirit, the whole 9 yards. And when we set that up and we look at it, we go, I got a 50-50 chance. Just the sheer fact of saying, I'm going to get on the path to trying this is a bold move, because our brains are wired for risk aversion. And what that means is we want to preserve what we've got. And so I'm going to say that the boldness does not necessarily mean that we're going to transform the world and we're going to reduce carbon emissions and we're going to do it in record time. Sometimes the bold move is just to move outside of the safe, the comfortable, and the predictable, and to just say, what's possible, number one, and what is the thing that I have told myself over the last 10 years that is impossible? What if it were possible? What would I need to do to just embrace that, to say what's possible? 99% of the people that I work with who are frontline employees believe more in the impossible being true, that it's just impossible. Leaders believe that things are possible. And so their number one job is to cultivate that belief in the impossible down inside the organization. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. Is that right? How am I doing on that?
That's great.
Well, I thought you did great. I that was fantastic. And you've led us to the last break. You were going to take that short break to hear from our corporate sponsors. And when we come back with our guest, Hugh Blane, for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to have Hugh jump in the DeLorean. Don't walk away. I'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. And Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, BC Fitness Studio, and Port Ludlow Resort. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Okay, well, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm co-host Linda Popke. Our guest today is Hugh Blane, and our next segment, Hugh, as you know, is Plead the Fifth.
Hugh, we're going to pepper you with more questions. If you forgot, you can plead the fifth once and only once, and then we might have you speak some more Scottish or not. So listen. Dr. Brown, you've met up with Dr. Brown. You've jumped into the DeLorean. You're going back to the future. All right. You're familiar with the movie, I take it.
I am.
All right. You have jumped back to the time when you were 18 years old, however many years that has been, and you come across your 18-year-old self without messing up the time continuum. We don't want you to just magically disappear. What you got 5 minutes. What advice are you going to give an 18-year-old Hugh?
Stop thinking about yourself.
Well, that was great. I love it.
Wait a minute. Do I need to keep on going? I mean, listen, stop thinking about yourself and think about others. And, my life at 18 was very self-referential. I was thinking about myself. I was thinking about what I wanted. I was thinking about my needs, and I did not have the capacity to think in a generative way about what other people wanted and how I could make their lives better. So at 18, I was confused about what I was going to do with college. I was confused about, um, just kind of how I fit into the world. So at that 18-year-old, I would go back and I would really have a conversation. Just suspend thinking about yourself. If you think about others, and if you think about making people's lives better, your whole life will become better. It will become richer financially, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. Everything will get better. Stop thinking about yourself.
Okay, that's pretty basic. All right. So I'm going to ask you another question. You're about to have a dinner party, and you could have dinner with anybody in the world, dead or alive, at any time. Who would you choose to be sitting having dinner with? Who do you want to have a conversation with?
Well, because it's Advent and I'm Catholic, I'm probably going to choose Jesus, so that would be the first one. I'm going to go, wait a minute, I'm thinking of the Last Supper. That'd probably be a kind of nice meal to be at, I think. If I then went away from that, I would then say dead or alive. The person, oh, that's a really good question. I'd be really interested to have a conversation with Abraham Lincoln.
Mm.
I would want to say, just tell me, what was it like to lead the United States through a period where, how we were dealing with slavery, how you were dealing with the Civil War. I mean, the just carnage, the just unfathomable carnage. And then your wife is also mentally disturbed. And how are you dealing with all of this? So I think Abraham Lincoln would be a fabulous person to have dinner with.
All right. All right.
Unfortunately, he tried to get away from it all by going to the theater, and that just didn't work out.
Oh man,
He
that
tried
is
to life
bad,
balance
Linda.
stuff,
That is
right?
bad. Oh, geez.
So I know, Hugh, that you love what you do. I know you love what you do. But
Yeah.
let's say I said, Hugh, you got to not write any more books, not do any more of this stuff. You got to start a business based on a hobby. What's the hobby? What's the business?
Skeet shooting with barbecue and bourbon.
Hmm.
So
I have to tell you, that has never come up.
I haven't heard that one either. Do you have the bourbon first, or
are you skeet shooting?
No.
You're not breaking any bottles, right?
No. You're not breaking any bottles. So there's one skeet shooting place around here, and it's okay. You know, I'd like for it to be a little bit more upscale. And I think that it would be just a blast that if you go there on Friday or Saturday night, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, that you could go and just break a lot of clay. You could smell the gunpowder. You could go through all of that. And then you'd go over and you'd have some barbecue and you'd sit down and you'd have a bourbon.
Okay, so the bourbon comes after you do the shoot. Okay, then
I don't think I would not be able to get insurance if people were getting bourbon and then
First.
picking up their shotguns.
Hugh, I've done axe throwing. That's the way they work on it too. There's a chronology to it.
So somebody invited me to this reception and they said, we're going to be doing some axe throwing. And I said, where are you doing it? And they mentioned this particular bar. And I said, you do know that sounds like the most inane thing to do is to give people axes and then give them alcohol.
Yes.
I don't get those two. Yeah, I didn't get that.
Well, they don't have a lot of repeat business. Okay. So, outside of, we know about your business and your work, what you do. We know about your family, Allison. You have a wonderful dog. Besides that, what else brings you joy in life besides skeet shooting with bourbon?
I was just talking about that with Allison the other day. And one of the things that Allison does is that, so we have the giant wonder dog, Remy, who's a giant schnauzer, weighs about 92 pounds. And, we've always had dogs. And so she trains dogs. And so the theme that's within our house is training and potential and performance. So we do a lot of nose work with Remy. So it's really weird. It's not like I am myopic. But my professional life and my personal life are just so incredible. I mean, it's like a double helix. It's a DNA strand that there's this double helix about mindset, that training. It just operates all the time. I'm fascinated by people. So when I meet people, I'm always interested in their story. We were talking before we went live about everybody's got a story. So for me, I love to hear people's story, and I just love to hear what got them to the particular place where they are. And then to then say, well, where would you like to be in 10 years? That conversation gives me great joy because I believe wholeheartedly that there's something that I could offer them to help them achieve things that they never imagined possible. So, Linda, I cannot turn that off. It's there. The other thing is I just came back from a week-long trip with a friend of 50 years where we went to Kentucky, and we went on the bourbon tour. We went on the bourbon trail. So the other thing for me is I love to go back, and I love to travel to Spain and Italy and Europe, because that's kind of like my home turf. So traveling and people, those are the things that just raise my boat.
Okay. All right. Dan, do you have another question? You want me to ask a question?
Nope, I think we are going to the contact information.
All right. Okay. Well, Hugh, thank you so much for being our guest here on the Shrimp Tank. And for listeners who want to get in touch with you or learn more about your company, how can they get more information?
They can go to Claris, Claris consulting.net, and they can also find me on LinkedIn.
All right. And tell us again about the name of the book.
Lead Boldly, How to Coach Others to Greatness, comes out from Red Wheel Publishing in June of 24.
All right. So coming up middle of the year, everybody look out for that. And make sure you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcasts. iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud. What was the other one? Overcast?
Overcast, yep.
Okay. Because we are, Dan,
We are ubiquitous.
we are ubiquitous. And follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, Hugh, thank you very much for your repeat visit. It's been too long. We will catch up when the book is published. I guarantee you that. We'll want to hear some more about that. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and best to Allison. Linda, it's been a pleasure. I know I'll still see you around the consulting circles, but thank you for everything that you've contributed to our podcast. Thank you. Everybody,
Thank you.
our next show, as Linda said, by the way, every Wednesday, live streaming on our Facebook page. Our next show will be Wednesday, December 20th. Our guest will be Stephen Sims. Monica Blackwood will be my co-host. In the meantime, be safe, be well, and be prosperous, because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.